Good morning, everyone. Today we will study Module 3, Comparative Advantage and Trade. Okay, so we are going to understand this simple story. So the story is that each country will focus on what it can do better. Okay, the U.S. will focus on producing something and China will focus on producing something. Okay, so in other words, they are going to specialize in the good on which it has competitive advantage. And then after focusing on the good that it can do for producing, and then they're going to trade excess of the consumption in exchange for the other good. Okay, because even if the U.S. focus on something, we need to consume the products made by China, right? So we are going. So they want to trade with each other. Okay, so that's the main story. Okay, so basically we're going to understand gains from trade, why a trade and how trade leads us to enjoy uh, 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 the gains from trade. So these are main concepts: competitive advantage. How do we define competitive advantage? And specialization is simple. Specialization means that the country will focus on producing that good. Okay, so that's a specialization. And then gains from trade. So we can consume more. We can enjoy more of the goods from trade relative to the situation where we are self-sufficient. We produce and consume only the good that we produced. That's self-sufficient, but we can gain from trade because of larger consumption. Okay. So what is competitive advantage? Each country will have a good that it can make at a cheap cost. Okay. Then we say that the country has the competitive advantage of this good. Okay, we the U.S. has a competitive advantage in producing wine, for example, California especially wine. So, but Japan has no competitive advantage in producing wine. Okay, so but Japan has a competitive advantage in producing, say, computer. Sorry, TV. Okay, TV, because the U.S. also makes TV. It applies to individuals. Each individual will have a task that is especially easy for each of the individual relative to other tasks felt by himself, herself. So you have your own competitive advantage over something. So you have competitive advantage in computer game. Okay, computer game, because you are good at doing computer game relative to what you would do a for economics. I have a competitive advantage in economics because I teach it. That's why I teach it. But importantly, how the task is easy for himself, herself is relative to how she would feel for other tasks. So how you feel about your computer game should be relative to what you would feel about your own study of economics. Okay, you don't have to compare with me, different person. You have to compare the task that is done by yourself. Okay, so that's competitive advantage. So more detail here. So basically, we want to distinguish between competitive advantage and absolute advantage. In modern days, for example, let's say majority of manufactured goods are made in China and other developing countries such as say China and Brazil, India, Bangladesh, those are developing countries. Then the manufactured goods are made from these countries and then imported to the U.S. Okay, that's so like this one. This is clothing. If you look at the tag from your clothing, then you will see that it's made from China or Bangladesh. Okay, does it mean that these countries, developing countries, have an absolute advantage in producing these goods compared to the U.S.? By saying by talking about this absolute advantage, we are making comparison between uh, across countries of our productivity. It will not mean that these developing countries have an absolute advantage in producing these goods relative to the U.S. Okay, so it doesn't. So these countries probably don't have absolute advantage, but they have competitive advantage in these goods. Okay, especially the goods that require relatively low skills. These countries have productivity advantage over their own productivity on other high skill requiring products such as aircraft, computer software, and services like banking and financing. Those are the things that the US is good at. Okay, so the US is good at both things. So say we are good at producing computer, the hardware and software. So compared to Bangladesh. However, Bangladesh will focus on making clothing because it can make clothing at a cheap cost relative to what they do for producing software. Okay, so when we talk about this absolute advantage, we are making comparison between countries. Okay, of our productivity, absolute productivity. But comparative advantage means that we are comparing productivity over the good that the country himself is making. If we talk about this next example using explicit model, then it's clearer. Okay, it's clearer. Okay, so let's look at the next slide here. So we're going to study this simple model of comparative advantage. Then you will see, and then you will have a clear understanding what I have been talking about. So assume that as a simple example, there are only two countries, including the U.S. and Brazil. The U.S. is one company nation with only Boeing, the aircraft manufacturer, which produces only two kinds of goods, large jets and small jets. Brazil is also one company nation whose name is Embraer, which also produces the same kinds of goods, including large jets and small jets. Okay. So we will see their production possibility frontier, and then we'll see that. Okay. So let's look at their production possibility frontier. This is U.S. production possibility frontier. So as we learned from the last module, the PPF production possibility frontier is a combination of small jets and large jets that are possible for production under full employment. So for example, if the US focuses on producing only small jets, it can produce up to 40 units of small jets. If they focus on producing large jets, they can produce up to 30 large jets. They are choosing this intermediate point, the point here, which produces 16 small jets and 18 large jets, and then they are consuming that combination. They are consuming 16 small jets, and they are producing and consuming 18 large jets. That's the U.S. Production possibility frontier. Brazil production possibility frontier is a little bit to the inward. If Brazil focuses on producing small jets, it can produce up to 30 small jets. If it focuses on large jets, it can produce up to 10 large jets. In between, they are choosing this point as its consumption bundle, so that it's producing 6 small jets and 8 large jets. These are just given. These are just given as an example. So from this simple situation, can you notice that US has the absolute advantage in both goods? Why is it so? So US is better in producing small jets than Brazil, because if it focuses on small jets, it can produce more than Brazil, because it can produce 30 relative, which is larger than 30 units of small jets. How about large jets? Does the US have absolute advantage in producing large jets? Yes, because US can produce up to 30 large jets, whereas Brazil can produce only up to 10 large jets. So it means that US is good at producing both goods in absolute productivity comparison. However, does it mean that the US should make both goods and then be self-sufficient? Does it mean that because we are good at both goods, we have to produce all the goods and then we just become self-sufficient? Probably not, because uh, for the following reasons that we will study. So if each country is self-sufficient, then US would produce only that amount of small jets and 18 large jets. If Brazil is self-sufficient, it will consume and produce X6 and small jets and 8 large jets. Okay, but is it good for them to be self-sufficient? Should they even consider trade, and then will they able to gain from trade? How is it so? Even if the US is good at producing both goods, should we do that? We shouldn't do that, because for the following reasons. Okay, so we'll study competitive advantage and specialization, trade and gains from trade. Okay, the US will specialize in its production in the good that it has a competitive advantage. You will see that the US has competitive advantage over large jets. Okay, then it means that the US will produce only large jets. Okay, Brazil will specialize in the good that it has competitive advantage. We will see that Brazil has competitive advantage in small jets. Then it can produce only it can produce only small jets. Okay, and then after each country specializes in each good that it has competitive advantage, then it's going to engage in trade. Then we'll see that both countries are now able to consume more of these both goods than before. So there are gains from trade. This is the overall story. Okay, so we'll understand that story. Then your natural question is, okay, so I said here in this slide that US has competitive advantage over large jets. Brazil has competitive advantage in small jets. How do we know that US has a competitive advantage in large jets and Brazil over small jets? How do we know that? Formal definition is that a country has a competitive advantage over the good if producing the good involves a lower opportunity cost. That's important point here. So there should be underlined here. So if producing involves a lower opportunity cost relative to the other good, then we say that the country has the opportunity cost. US has a lower opportunity cost of producing a large jet relative to producing a small jet. That's why US has a competitive advantage over large jets. Okay, Brazil has a lower opportunity cost of producing a small jet relative to producing a large jet. That's why they have a competitive advantage in small jets. Okay. Okay. Okay, so what is the opportunity cost? Okay, so this is basically review from of the last lecture. Opportunity cost, how do we define opportunity cost? Opportunity cost of the good measured by, so we'll see that here. Opportunity cost of the good, okay, sorry. Opportunity cost of the good measured by the horizontal axis. get this PPF, opportunity cost of the good measured by the horizontal axis. That's small z. Okay, opportunity cost of the good measured by the horizontal axis. Okay, so I made a mistake here. Opportunity cost of the good measured by horizontal axis. That's small z. Small z is the small z. Okay, so opportunity cost of the good measured by the horizontal axis. Opportunity cost of the good measured by the horizontal axis. Opportunity cost of the good measured by the horizontal axis. That's a small z. In other words, opportunity cost of the good opportunity cost of a small z. In other words, or opportunity cost of producing each small z is the slope of the PPF. Slope of the PPF. What's the slope here? Slope. So in the US case, minus 3/4. Minus 3/4. Okay, so that's the slope. Okay, the slope. Okay, slope of the PPF. Okay. So in this way, so opportunity cost here. Okay. So cost of a small z is 3/4 large z in the US. Opportunity cost of producing a small z in Brazil is what? Slope. 1/3. 1/3 opportunity cost of small z in terms of large z is opportunity cost of producing small z in terms of large z in Brazil is what? 3/4. Okay, 3/4 what? 3/4 large z. Got it? Okay, so that's that's the definition of the opportunity cost. So between this opportunity cost, which country has a lower opportunity cost? US has, so Brazil has a lower opportunity cost. Got it? Because it has a low opportunity cost, 3/4 large jets. 1/3 large jets. So Brazil has a comparative advantage. Over small jets. Okay. So let's look at the next point. Opportunity cost. Let's look at the next point here. Opportunity cost of good measured by the vertical axis. Now small jet here. Sorry, again mistake. Large jet is the inverse of the slope of the PPM. How many inverse? How many units of small jets foregone when another large jet is produced? Okay. In US. In US, opportunity cost of the good measured by the vertical axis here, large jet, opportunity cost of producing a large jet in terms of small jet is what? opportunity cost of producing a large jet is, in terms of small jet, is inverse, which is, because it's inverse, a 4/3 small jets. In other words, US will give up, must give up 4/3 small jets to produce each extra large jet. Got it? Okay. In Brazil, opportunity cost of producing a large jet is inverse, which is inverse of 1/3 is three small jets. In other words, to produce another large jet, Brazil must give up 3 small jets. Got it? So based on this, which one has a, so since US has a lower opportunity cost of producing large jets, got it? Because so opportunity cost for large jet in terms of small jets is 4/3, but in Brazil it's 3. It's a lower opportunity cost, so US has comparative advantage. Is over what? Over large jet production. Okay, so in this way we can understand that why US has a comparative advantage in US has comparative over large jet production, and Brazil has a comparative advantage over small jet production. Okay, so that's why actually. So we don't have to look at this this point here because we already wrote down everything up here. Okay, so together. Okay, so that's what it is. So US has a comparative advantage in producing large jets, and Brazil has a comparative advantage in producing small jets. Okay, then what's the next? Okay, so we learned so far that the US has a comparative advantage over large jets, and Brazil has a comparative advantage over small jets. Then US will focus on producing large jets, and Brazil will focus on producing only small jets. That's a specialization. Then the problem is that if they focus on what it can do best, should they consume only that amount? Should they consume only that amount? No. They will now engage in trade. Okay. Can they consume more of both goods? Can US consume more of both small jets and large jets relative to this point here? Can Brazil consume more of small jets and large jets? Can they consume more than the amount they consumed before specialization? So they can consume more of these goods compared to this point here. Can they consume more of both goods with trade? Then they were self-sufficient. Okay. Our answer will be yes, and we will understand how. So that's what we are going to study in the next class, in the next week. Okay, so in the next Monday there will be no class because Monday is Labor Day, so we'll study this topic on Wednesday. So try to focus on what it is, and then check the sapling homework because I'm going to give a homework on Monday, even if it is Labor Day. Okay, so thank you and see you. Okay, next week.